Hi, welcome to another Cat Space session. It is Thursday night. I'm Kat, this is Buckets, and always with us is our amazing dear friend Leon. Good evening, how are you?
I'm in a robe, so I know what it feels like to be living the posh life. No. Only kidding. I am wearing a robe because it's pretty cold outside. It's been pretty cold all week. Well, it's been cold today and yesterday, that's for sure.
I love the cold. So tonight we are doing something everyone has been asking for, and you guys have been asking me to do, is to research and look up some fun topics instead of some serious, tense, stressful topics. So I've come up with a really, really fun, I think, Leon, you will sink your teeth into, as well as Buckets. Tonight's topic is all about 80s technology. So the 80s, of course, was an interesting period, era, time frame. I was born at the end of 81, so I don't remember much of technology, but as I grew up, I did. So the first point I have is, before the question is, if you remember in 1984, the late, great Steve Jobs released Macintosh. First question is, what computer and brand did you have in your home, and were you obsessed with using it?
Computers, or are we talking about?
Like computers.
Okay.
The gangly ones, the big box ones.
Okay, so in my family, my father was a scientist, right? And because he was a scientist, they actually gave him a really small Mac. I think it was the first original Mac, the one where it didn't actually have an IP address on it, and he was given one of those. But then again, no one really had the internet back then. It was good in the sense that you could do programming stuff and whatever, but it had no games on it. So I guess I wasn't really as obsessed until we got a Commodore 64. And that thing was cool because we had all sorts of games on it, and you could basically hook up your own triggers and stuff like that. And I remember when we had Rambo on that, and a friend of ours lent us the trigger thing, and I was gunning so hard on that thing that I actually broke the trigger. So, I had a lot of fun on the Commodore 64. That was sick. I love that.
Yeah, I agree. We had a Commodore 64 in our family, and we just absolutely loved it. We could play like all these computer games within, you could just basically go on DOS and whatnot, and put the floppy disks in and just enjoy yourselves playing like the computer games and learning and whatnot. I think that was a really, really cool one. I would have loved to have had the Macintosh because you could do so much more with it, but Commodore 64 was ours. What about you?
Oh, definitely, man. I had a Commodore 64 myself. What I used to do, right? Obviously, you talked about the floppy disks and also the cartridges as well.
Yeah.
Plugged them into the back of the Commodore. I think one of the first cartridge games I had from the Commodore 64, I think it might have been International Soccer or something like that. But the goalie was so poorly designed. It's so backwards. It didn't adapt to anything. So if you ever, here's a little hint for all you guys out there who never played the international soccer game on the cartridge, right? If you ever went down to the bottom of the ground and you got to where you were close to being in line with the goalie, just sneak past the goalie and just aim upwards and just kick the ball, and you get a goal every time. I've flogged those guys about 100 points to nil every freaking time. That was probably one of the first cartridge games I think I'd ever had on the Commodore 64, but definitely the Commodore 64 was probably one of the earliest computer systems I ever had. And also the old Atari 2600. Now that is the early model. So that was the early brown model from around I think it was around about 1982 or something like that. But anyway, I was using that one. I was using that one as a kid, and then I went to the 7600 or something like that, which was a smaller model. The Atari, I think it might have been the Atari 5200, I think, or something along those lines. But anyway, you get the point.
Speaking of Atari, you brought up a really good point, which is, I was going to make it my last question, but anyway, Atari as a child, did you spend hours playing Atari, and what games did you spend hours playing? I think for me it was Space Invaders, and it was what did we have? Space Invaders. And so it was like a ping pong game.
That was called Pong.
Yeah, Pong, and
Yeah, I think it was called Pong. What about Pac-Man?
and Pac-Man. And FYI, for those who don't remember Atari or those who do, did you know that Steve Jobs actually did the, I think, colored version of Atari?
Well, I actually,
he worked for the company or something. He worked for a company that
okay.
He did it in what, 90 days, 60 days?
Well, okay. So the story goes, right, is that Steve Jobs basically created a computer program or using Atari software, and he tried to sell what we now know as the first original Apple to Atari. And he said, look, I've got a computer. I want to sell you this computer. Everyone's just going to love it. Please buy it. And they didn't take him seriously. And they said, this is boring. No one's going to like it. We're not going to buy this. And then he begged them. And then he said, look, we're using Atari technology. We're using all, the stuff that you put in your own game consoles. Like the megs and the gigs and things. Well, they didn't have gigs back then, but they had megs. That for this, computer, why can't you just can you just employ us instead of us being a business partner? And Atari said no again and said, no way, this isn't going to work. So it was basically a kick in the bum when Macintosh basically outlived Atari, and then Atari pretty much went bankrupt because they couldn't go anywhere. They didn't have the vision to take Steve Jobs' idea, and then they just started their own company, and that's sure. What happened.
But the thing is, how fun was Atari? I mean, it had it on joystick. You could just plug it in, set it to the TV, and then for hours you could just play Space Invaders and Pong till your eyes got tired, and then you were like, okay, I'm going to stop playing this and go to bed. And then in the morning you'd wake up on the weekends and it was Atari time. There's nothing else. We didn't have social media at the time. We didn't have internet. We had Atari.
Well, I think
the reason why I used the Atari back then was to help my hand-eye coordination, because I had no hand-eye coordination till I started playing those games. Because that way it gave me the sense to where things were going to go, because I think there was I don't know, I can't remember the game itself, but it was one of those ones where you hit a brick, where you bounced your guy off the seesaw thing, and he hit a brick and he went down. It was up to you to figure out where he was going to land. See, that was the hand-eye coordination thing that I was talking about. But like I said, I can't remember the game, but that was the way that I learned how to use my hand-eye coordinations, because of those kind of games from the Atari, and also played like Joust and all that sort of stuff. Space Invaders, as you said, but then again, obviously my all-time favorite would have been Pac-Man for absolute sure, because I always have a soft spot for Pac-Man, because it was, I completed so many levels up there. Eventually, it got too fast for me.
What about you, Buckers? Did you end up playing for hours?
Yeah, you know what? My family had an Atari, and they had back then you couldn't get Star Wars on one cartridge. You had to get each Star Wars set, but they were really smart, so they got pretty much the best scenes from Star Wars. You don't need to push my back, thanks. They got pretty much the best scenes from Star Wars, and so they got things like the bit from A New Hope, where they blew up the Death Star, and then they got the bit where they're basically shooting up all the AT-ATs from Empire, and then they got I can't remember what the Return of the Jedi version was, because I never actually got that one. But they were really smart in the way that they particularly picked scenes that were action scenes that everyone loved, kind of thing. But I think my favorite game out of all of them was Ghostbusters. The Ghostbusters game that they actually made that came out on Atari, that was cool, and I loved it, and I played it for hours.
That came out on the Atari. You're kidding. I didn't even have. I don't know if I had that one on the Atari, but I know I had that on the Commodore. I think I had that on the Commodore 64.
And but one thing I remember about it was Winston was blue instead of black for some reason. But yeah, it was. They actually had it on a few cartridges. It wasn't just Atari. They had it on. They had it on Nintendo as well. I don't think they had it on Sega. But I do actually remember playing that off Atari, and it was fantastic. But there was another one that was great that I remember, and that was Superman. And Superman was awesome. I loved changing from Clark Kent back into Superman by going into a telephone booth. That was cool. Okay, and
I think I used to have that one.
Yeah, that was a great game. I have great memories of that. And I just remember just playing with my brothers and stuff like that with that game. And it's just brings back so much nostalgia. You know, I wish I could just go back to it and get my Atari back. Unfortunately, I don't.
Well, technically you can, right? Technically you can. Now there is ways that you can actually do it. I think, if I'm right, you know, places like maybe EB Games or in some cases maybe JB Hi-Fi or even JCar, they do sell emulators, like legit emulators and stuff like that, would actually have games built into it. I'm not exactly 100% sure if it's the Atari one though, but I know they can do that with like the old Commodore 60. You can get these online as well for your PC. You can look for Atari emulators, PlayStation emulators, Commodore 64 emulators. You can find a lot of these online, and you can actually get them, so you can actually play them on your newer computers. You know, just for the lols.
Now, obviously, nowadays in this modern technology, we have things like PlayStation 2, 3, 4, 5. Let me take you back a couple of decades. Let me take you back to 1985. Let's go on a journey, shall we? 1985, the Nintendo Entertainment System was born. Did you own a Nintendo Entertainment System? And would you say it's quite similar to the PS3 or the PS4, the PS5 of this generation, but was it the original PlayStation before PlayStation, if you catch my drift?
Okay, so you had the Nintendo Entertainment System, but yeah, I take it you're not talking about the you're not talking about a SNES.
No, not the Super Nintendo. I'm talking about the first 1985.
Okay. Well, let's see. I didn't have one of those. I had a Sega instead. For some reason, I had a Sega Master System.
We'll talk about that then.
Okay. So, yeah, we had a Sega Master System. I just remember when I had a Sega Master System, and that was awesome. I found that they actually had more variety than the better quality one, which I think was... It had another name. It was Sega something, but it didn't have as much.
Sega Mega System.
Yeah, there we go. The Sega Mega Drive.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
So they had a Sega Mega Drive, and that was supposed to be better quality and had better stuff, but they didn't have the variety apparently. So the Sega Master System had more variety. But I just remember the kids going, "Oh, you know, we want Nintendo because Nintendo's better." But you know what? I played Sonic the Hedgehog all day long, and I used to play Alex Kidd all the time. And to be perfectly honest, I thought Alex Kidd and Sonic the Hedgehog was actually better than Super Mario Brothers, to be perfectly honest.
For me, it was the Nintendo Entertainment System. And as you said, we had Sonic the Hedgehog. We also had Pac-Man. We also had Mario Brothers, the original Mario Brothers.
But that was from Nintendo. That wasn't.
Yeah, but Nintendo Entertainment System came out. You know those big block of games that you'd stick in the middle?
Yeah.
and you could play those games. One of them for us was Super Mario Brothers, and that theme music still resonates in my head. Yeah. So it's for us, it was really, really fun. And Pac-Man, we had Sonic the Hedgehog, and sort of like those. Wouldn't you reminisce about going, God, if only we could have those now?
Well, my cousin actually, he had an original Nintendo Entertainment System, and he had he had actually Donkey Kong, and that game was awesome. I really liked Donkey Kong, and my brother, actually, you could get all this stuff in Hong Kong before it even reached the shores of Australia, and they had they had Donkey Kong packs, right, that you could actually play as if they were like before the original Game Boy. And you'd open it up, and it's like a case, and you play them, and they were quite cool. So we used to play that all day, and all it really needed was lots and lots of batteries. And you could play it all night.
Well, you mentioned Super Mario Brothers. You mentioned Donkey Kong. Just for the historians out there, right? It was Donkey Kong that started the Super Mario Brothers, because it was Donkey Kong on the top and it was Mario at the bottom, trying to get his way up to the top to save Peach.
And there was
and then from there, because of how successful it was, that's how it got to the Mario Brothers.
I didn't even know that.
And also there was a rip-off of the Super Mario Brothers on the Commodore 64 called the Great Gina Sisters. Now, this was a complete rip-off of the Mario Brothers, but dressed up as women. So, yeah, that's a little bit of a historical feature for you right there from the Commodore 64 days, and also the Nintendo days, because it was the Nintendo that brought along Donkey Kong. Nintendo brought along Super Mario Brothers as well. Like the Atari brought along Pong, Space Invaders, Pac-Man. So there are legacy games out there which you can remember because of these games. There's games that stick out in the top of your head, like the Mega Drive, the Master System, the Mega Drive that you mentioned there, Buckets. That brought in Alex Kidd. In this case, Alex Kidd Miracle World or something like that, one of those ones.
So anyway. The biggest problem with Alex Kidd, right, is that there was something like, I think, 6 Alex Kidd games. And
that sounds about right.
Before Alex Kidd in Wonderworld, right? Or something along those lines. And they were terrible. They were absolutely terrible. So they were games that weren't, they're really just like more like choose your own adventure games than or maze games where you find things and pick things up and whatever. And there was basically this one bit where it actually says, do you wish to pick up the samurai costume, right? And you pick up the samurai costume and you put it on, and it literally says, as quote, Alex Kidd has put on the samurai costume and plays with the samurai costume for the rest of the episode, and completely forgets about the mission at hand. And you die because of that, because he's because he's
a bit of Easter eggs and stuff like that. I used to have the old Alex Kidd death music, you know, do 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 do. Yeah.
But
you talk about underestimated games. Like, obviously Alex Kidd had a bunch of them, right? Alex Kidd did have a bunch of those games.
Yeah,
but I just want to quickly call back a second for some couple of underestimated games on those other systems, like Wonder Boy. Do you remember that one?
Yes, I do. I loved Wonder Boy. Wonder Boy was awesome.
I think I'd mastered that one. Also, Wonder Boy and Monsterland as well. That was my other absolute favorite. And also Pac-Land as well. So that was another one.
Oh my God, I don't even know these games. And you're educating.
Pac-Mania. There's another one for you. Pac-Mania was a 3D version of Pac-Man. and it had better music, it had better graphics, and it had 3D, it had 3D things, and you were able to jump, and then the ghosts were able to jump eventually. So that's what made it difficult. That's what made Pac-Mania harder, because they gave Pac-Man the ability to jump, and for some reason they gave the ghosts the ability to jump when they're freaking ghosts, when all they had to do was just raise themselves up a bit and they could have just taken Pac-Man out to dinner. But anyway.
I honestly I didn't even know these games existed, and I'm learning something. Speaking of
Buckets and I are nerds when it comes to these kind of games, that's for sure. Isn't that right, Buckets?
I prefer to call myself a connoisseur.
Isn't that another word for nerd?
Yes.
I'll proudly call myself a nerd, because quite frankly, I am, because I know all these games. Yeah, so, but like I said, Pac-Man, there were so many good Pac-Man ones. Obviously, Pac-Man, Pac-Land, also Pac-Mania as well. 3 versions of that. They used to be a coin operated game as well, Pac-Mania, if I remember right.
I do remember Miss Pac-Man.
Miss Pac-Man, yes.
That was actually more valued than Pac-Man, even though it was a girl, because what they tried to do, and very successfully, was because everyone knew Pac-Man, right? But the maps were repetitive, so everyone knew the map, so they could corner it and win it and whatever. And so Mrs. Pac-Man was better because Mrs. Pac-Man actually had more maps, and it turned it into a 2-player. And so a lot of the time, what people tried to do when they tried to sell arcade games to manufacturers was they would actually remove the outside of it and call it Mrs. Pac-Man, so they could actually sell it for more than just normal Pac-Man. And it also appealed to girls because it was like, oh, here's a video game for you that's basically almost the same as Pac-Man, but better than Pac-Man. And so instantly they actually doubled their income in the arcade with those arcade games, purely because...
And it also broke the gender mold as well, because it was the first of those games that broke that kind of mold, because there wasn't that mold before until Mrs. Pac-Man, which is the spin-off of Pac-Man. And then you remember the old joke where, like, at nighttime when Mrs. Pac-Man would come home from work, take the mascara off, and it was really Pac-Man but dressed as a woman.
Oh yes,
the old Dorkly skits right there. Thank you very much, Dorkly.com.
Actually,
I don't know if they're still around, but they did a lot of parodies on those games.
Do you know actually how Pac-Man actually started? How they actually came up with the idea of Pac-Man. So one day, the original creator of Pac-Man, who was a Japanese person, which I can't remember his name, basically was really interested in American culture. And so what he did was, he thought, to be inspired, he went to a pizza parlor. And so he took one slice out from the pizza, because he got a cheese Hawaiian pizza, right? And he said, wait a minute, this is basically we can make this Pac-Man. We can turn this into an actual character, because without its pizza slice, it's got a mouth, it's got eyes, it's cheesy, which means it's yellow. And then from there, that's how they created Pac-Man. And it became...
Did they take 2 slices or 1 slice out of that pizza to make Pac-Man? They took 1
slice and...
One slice?
Yeah, and then they probably ate the rest of the pizza out of celebration.
But next thing you know, they'll be walking out the door going waka 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 waka.
Yeah, so that's how they did it.
Okay, so we said the Nintendo Entertainment System was 1985. Let's transport 4 years forward to 1989, when the Game Boy was introduced, which is of course, the smaller version of Nintendo system. I think for me, the most iconic game I spent hours playing was Tetris. And it was just like hours after hours, and then your battery would die and you'd have to get like another AA batteries, and then like you'd have to recharge the game when you got home plug it in, and you'd have to recharge the game. Then once it's full, you start up again. It's sort of like, and you put the batteries into the game.
I'm never going to break my high score this way.
Yeah, and it's sort of like mind-boggling.
I broke the high score, and I also broke the registered score of whatever they had. But I used to hate the fact that there was no real memory chip in it, so my score would be wiped. But there is
that's an interesting point there. They never had a memory. They never had a memory thing. All they had was the batteries, and hope to God the batteries didn't run out.
Yeah, but I think the cartridge itself was pretty much the memory chip. But once you took it out, that's it.
Yeah, you couldn't play it.
Yeah,
yeah, that's it. Once you took the cartridge out, you couldn't play the game because the game was already out of the Game Boy. But I'm with you guys. I think Tetris, definitely. I definitely played Tetris. I played it on my cousin's Nintendo Game Boy, and I remember it being fully charged, and when I started to play it, and then when it was close to game over because everything was going so fast, and that's what happens with Tetris. The more lines you get and the higher your score is, the quicker the game goes. It's harder for you to adapt, and the battery went flat. And you couldn't save the highest score because there was just no way to do it on the old Game Boys. But I loved the idea that Nintendo had with bringing in the Game Boy because it was handheld. You could put in batteries, unlike the Atari, Commodore 64, or the NES, the original NES. You couldn't carry them around and put batteries in it because it just wasn't going to work. That's why the Game Boy came out, because it had the display as well as the controller. I liked the idea. I loved the Game Boy, and I miss it to this day. And I think there might be some places around here in Blacktown, where I live, close to where I live, that might actually still sell some of that old nostalgia stuff, like the old Commodore 64, Atari. Maybe they might sell a Game Boy. I'm not sure. I might have to check cash converters or something, just for that nostalgia purpose.
Well, actually, it's an interesting point where you bring up all these 80s type games, right? Because if you remember Space Invaders, how that actually came about. So Space Invaders, they had several versions of that before it was actually Space Invaders. So what they actually did was they needed, purely based on the size of the graphics that they could get away with, they wanted to have urchins and things like that. So Space Invaders actually used to be a sea urchin game or an octopus game that would run across the screen. And if you didn't have enough time to shoot everything, then basically you'd lose. But they felt that it wasn't interesting enough. But about that time, Star Wars was just huge. Star Wars was big. Anything to do with space and lasers was massive. So they basically, instead of calling them sea creatures, what they did instead was they turned the sea creatures into aliens, and then they had motherships as extra points. And that was an instant sensation, and that just took off. And it got so popular that people actually had competitions to see how quickly they could kill things and everything like that. And it turned into an Olympic sport, almost an Olympic sport, where people were actually winning real money. It was absolutely amazing. So yeah, that was another good one. But,
I think they still do that, but with different games these days. Like I think it might be Fortnite or PUBG or whatever it is. There are still tournaments out there where you can actually win money just by playing computer games. I think they're still going. Those kind of things are still going these days. Obviously not for the Atari or the NES or the Game Boy, but I believe there is still some around.
Well, the Koreans love them. They're big in Korea, those type of competitions, those type of tournaments. And also the United States are big on them balls. But I think the number one country for those sort of tournaments is Korea. South Korea are big on those things. Absolutely huge. They love it. And I had a friend of mine, and this is actually quite funny. Is a friend of mine that went to uni and was studying the same subjects that I was. And he was from South Korea. And we were at the pub drinking alcohol and stuff like that, but it was for a uni thing and they were raising money for it. And he just went to me and said, do you want to basically start a video game club for the university? And they just looked at him really, really weird to say, you know what, we're not really into video games all that much. We're more into drinking wine and beer and other things. And they basically told him to go jump, basically. But I was just saying, but that's part of his culture. That's what he's doing. And to be perfectly honest, playing video games was just way more fun than, drinking near a bunch of people that are never going to ask you out. So,
all right. So, next question is, let's go forward. Okay, so we said the Nintendo Game Boy was 1989. Let's go a few years back further. 1979, a year before 1980, the explosion of the Sony Walkman. Now, the Sony Walkman, I remember having as a little girl, as a child, was very popular with me. The Sony Walkman was a popular music device. What songs do you remember listening to on your Walkman when it comes to music? Did you have stuff like recorded off the radio, or did you buy like cassettes like Crowded House or like bands or solo artists, and you just like played it and played it and played it and played it?
It was kind of both. So pirating was ridiculously easy. Not that I'm encouraging pirating, because we can't say that.
Yes,
we can't.
You shouldn't.
Because we don't want to get arrested.
Anyway,
I'm going to clear that up. Yeah. Anyway, so pirating was so easy back then, because it just was. And I remember my brothers, pirated a Tina Turner cassette. And don't hit me like that.
Shouldn't be saying things like that.
Well, it was. It's not my fault. It's the technology's fault. But what used to happen was, because it was like one of those cassettes that you could just buy from a $2 shop, you had to keep rewinding it with a pencil.
I love doing that.
Old school rewinding, guys. When you didn't know what to do, how to rewind a tape, you always used a pencil.
That's right.
There you go. Buckets is onto something there. That's Shark Tank in the 1980s for you. Continue.
Yeah. So we did lots of that, but so Tina Turner we had, there was Dire Straits that we had. That was great. Blues Brothers, we loved the original Blues Brothers, the actual cassette tape of that. We actually bought that, so we had respect for them. We had so many cassettes, and my brothers my brother Bernard, who was a muso, actually, who's a really talented muso. He could literally play any instrument. He would listen to the music off the Walkmans and stuff, and then he would put that into his own music, just play it, just by ear, so that was really good. But I remember
he does the music the same way I do it. I listen to a bit of music, and then I'm able to play it on a piano or play it on a guitar, and I never know how. I never knew how I managed to do that. So he and I are in the same boat there. Go on.
But I do remember there was this one time where my younger brother basically did this really funny thing, right? So it was about Christmas time, and my mum had a Walkman, and my mum basically just said, "Hey, has anyone seen my Walkman? Like, I wanted to go exercising with it. I haven't seen it. Has anyone seen it?" So then we all said, "No, we haven't seen it. Where have you left it? Did you put it in the kitchen or something? I don't know." Anyway, 2 months later, this Walkman goes missing, and it's like Christmas time, right? And I give my mom a present, and all my other brothers, they gave my mom presents as well. And Edmund's got this really heavy, my younger brother has got this really heavy gift. And we're like, what has Edmund got? So what he did, he actually, this is 100% true. He wrapped my mother's Walkman up for Christmas, left it under the tree for 2 months, okay, and just replaced the batteries, and then said, "Merry Christmas, Mom." And
what
we
a
just went,
cheapskate, man. Come on, you could have come up with a decent present. No, instead of wrap something up that doesn't even belong to him and wraps it up. What a cheapskate.
We just gave him a clap for ingenuity, and Edmund was just, my brother was just like, "Yeah, I gave you brand new batteries. Merry Christmas." And Mum was like over the moon because she found a Walkman.
I think I used to have to be honest, I think I used to have one of those CD Walkmans, but obviously it'd be Buckley's chance if I still got it now. It'd be unlikely, but anyway, look, I used to have that, and I still got like a CD collection of old 90s music because I'll be like Kat said she was born in 1981. I was born in 1980, so I grew up with listening to the music from the 80s and the 90s. No, I had one cassette, right? I think maybe one or two cassettes. The first cassette, I think the only cassette I ever got would have been around 93, 94. Salt and Pepper and En Vogue's Waterman. I don't
Oh
know
my God,
why that
great
stuck
song.
out to me, but anyway, I thought that was the only cassette that I ever had of like, music that I bought from the shop because I used to like listen to it on the radio. Obviously, used to the old blank cassette trick. If you break the top of the cassette, you couldn't record on it. Not necessarily
I
true.
remember
All you have
that.
to do is put some sticky tape on the. All you have to do is put some sticky tape on the bloody top of it, and there you can go again.
Yeah, I remember that.
That's the
I
old trick there. But I used to, like I said, I got a whole bunch of CDs. The first, the first cassette I had was Salt and Pepper and En Vogue's What a Man. The first CD single, which I've still got in my CD collection over there, Shania Twain. Not in it for love, I'm out of here. That was the first
love that
CD
song.
single I ever bought. And I've got that CD still today. And that's about 25 or 27 years old now.
I love that song. I mean, I remember having a bunch of empty cassettes and listening to at the time, which was very popular, which is 104.1 plug 104.1 Town with Lab Rat. And they had all this music, and you'd get it into the boombox and into the cassette deck because you had two sides, you had A and B side by side, and you put both cassettes. So you'd be waiting to rewind them and just wait because I remember listening to the radio like, oh, I like that song, and you'd have to call up and request that song because they had competitions going, and then you'd ring up, request the song, which I remember doing 1,000 times, and I just press record on my cassette. And then put it into the Walkman, and away I went, singing and dancing and jumping around. And
Yeah, those times were great. I even remember when. Do you remember when CD Walkmans came out?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
CD players.
Well, not CD. They were CD players, but they were CD Walkmans, and they were like.
I think you're right. I think they were called CD Walkmans. I think so. I think that's right.
So, but I remember when the Sony ones came out, that they actually allowed you to play CDs backwards. So you could actually hear the backmasking lyrics.
And also the anti-Semitic messages in the background playing when you played a CD backwards.
Yeah, and so I had this friend of mine that would do this all the time, and they would just talk gibberish as if it was like real words that was speaking, and like I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about.
I think my CD.
You're not speaking English. That's
Walkman,
Dutch or something. That's not English.
The CD Walkman. The CD Walkman, was it the round one or was it the cassette?
That was the round one.
It was the round one. The CD Walkman was the round one.
Yeah, I remember CD Walkman or CD player at the time. I remember the CDs I had listening to it was Christina Aguilera, What a Girl Wants, and the Backstreet Boys. And I had All I Have to Give. I had Backstreet's Back. And I had this compilation from Germany that they did an interview. And I remember being obsessed listening to Christina Aguilera and the Backstreet Boys on that.
Hey, if you guys talk for a couple of minutes, right, I might be able to go through my CD collection because I'm pretty certain I've got those Backstreet Boys CDs here as well.
I had them. I don't know where they've gone to. I might have to find them.
Well, I actually remember getting, there was two CDs that I got for the first time, and they were singles. And one of them was
I think they were known as CD singles, if my memory's right.
Yeah, and
that sounds about right.
And one of them was an Armageddon one from Aerosmith. That was.
I Don't Want to Miss a Thing.
I Don't Want to Miss a Thing.
I Don't Want to Miss a Thing. That was the first one.
I love Steven Tyler.
And the second one was New York Connection, I believe. And that I couldn't play them. I wanted them. I wanted to hear them, and I couldn't play them. And I needed my brother to basically pirate them in order for me to actually listen to them. So even though I bought the CDs from the CD store legally, I had to again pirate them just to basically listen to them.
Can you not say that? You're gonna get yourself in such trouble.
Well, I mean, it's the only way I
just
can
picture
listen.
it now. The Fed's gonna start knocking on your door. Is buckets here? No, just Philip. Okay, my mistake.
Okay,
Move along.
if the feds do come here, I would be honored that they'd make the trip to my unknown house.
Yeah, but I don't think you should be saying that on a podcast.
Anyway,
Pirating is wrong, kids. Don't do pirating. Don't do drugs either. Yeah. Go on.
don't do pirates because they'll make you walk the plank.
You'll get scurvy.
Hey, there you go. That's fun for you.
Can I ask a rando question, if you guys don't mind? Since we're going back to nostalgia, were VHS video recorders and VHS tapes part of the 80s technology, or was that later in the 90s?
You want to say that again?
Was the VHS video recorders and the video cassettes themselves, were they 80s or 90s products?
I believe, okay, so VHS itself, I believe that we might have been
late 80s.
Possibly 80s, but early 70s. I could be wrong. It might be 1979. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was the 80s. I do know that there were two brands of videotape at that time, and one was Beta, which was good, but no one could afford Beta, so wasn't really successful. And then you had VHS, which was poorer quality, but everyone could afford it, so they bought the cheaper one instead.
Again, I think
just for the record, guys, VHS tapes and stuff like that with 1976. Believe that or not, that's incredible. I didn't think they were going back that far back, but yeah, they were 1976. Now I'm looking for beta tapes just now because we used to have a VHS recorder. We used to have a beta tape player as well, beta tape recorder. Now beta tapes, but just before that, beta tapes originally came out in, what is it, I think it's Betamax, that they were called Betamax. So they came out of roughly 1975. So and then it went from beta to VHS. So there you go.
Yeah. But do you remember as kids, our parents taking us on holidays and with the big gangly, camera recorder thing, and it had the little cassette in it. And then you'd have to come home and charge the video camera, and then you have to plug it to the TV, and from the TV you'd plug the VHS.
I used to have one, and I used to have a mini tape recorder as well. I took it with me to England. I don't even know where it's gone, but anyway, look. But yeah, I took one too. I took one with me to England. When I was looking around, I was there with the little camera thing. Speaking, I was so cool having the mini bloody videotape recorder thingy there. That was so cool. All I was just doing is proving that I was a freaking tourist and an idiot. But anyway, look, the point is, I had one of those. I had one of those cameras. You had to put in the camera. You had to charge it up. You had to plug it in to charge it up. It'll change the batteries. I think it used to be. I think they used to be. What like the double, I can't remember the double A's or the whatever they were, but you could charge it the same. You could put the batteries in the same way you used to put batteries in a Game Boy or something. If you had the right batteries, you could do it that way as well.
But did you have one, Buckets?
No, I think my dad might have had one, but I could be mistaken. But I just remember those things were like massive, and I really like those things. I think I probably like the cover more than the actual, video camera, because the thing is, it looked like it could basically fit a semi-automatic in it.
Well, I didn't have a huge one. I had like a smaller one where you actually, it looked like it's really compact. It looks like a half loaf of bread or something like that, but you're able to open it up. And then all of a sudden you could see the little, obviously the screen where you're going to film and stuff like that. That blew my mind, man. It was the only video camera I'd actually ever had. So just a little bit of history for you right there.
Speaking of cameras, does anyone actually remember the old Polaroid cameras?
Yes, I used to have one.
So
I think they still sell them. I
think they still do too. And I think you can get them at Officeworks.
Fuji films.
But where they basically prints out your own film.
Yeah, you can buy those for children.
See, I remember when my dad had one of those, and he would take pictures everywhere, and within 5 minutes they'd turn out yellow. But
that's because he didn't shake it enough.
Yeah, so Oh yeah, you got to shake it. You really got to shake it. You got to shake
Like
it.
a Polaroid picture.
Gotta shake, rattle, and roll. But yeah, I used to have them, and I used to love taking pictures. And you'd basically it'd come out in the film, and you'd have to shake it for the image to come out. And it was so cool. I remember having them at like my birthday parties and stuff like that. That was really, really cool.
Yeah, that they were cool. And you know, I kind of miss those things. I should probably go out and buy one.
I remember, you know, when you would take like hundreds of them and you'd be like years later sit with your friends and you go, oh my God, what were we thinking? What were we wearing? What were we eating and drinking back then? So embarrassing. And you'd look back and go, wow. I don't know. You'd be like, what was I thinking?
You know what? With that thing, all I remember is good. It is just basically good memories from those photographs. I don't really remember any bad memories from the photographs. It's not like today where basically everyone's got a camera on their phone and there might be something terrible and it becomes viral and it's something you regret. Yeah, you know, back then when you took pictures, it took effort. And you only took pictures of good things. And it was just a happier time, I think.
And lastly, boys.
Hang on, before we go that, I still want to stick on the cameras. You know those portable cameras, those portable, snap cameras where they would have like 20 or 24 pictures or something like that rolled in the little rolling thing.
Yeah.
Rolling thing. I would buy one of those, every time that there was a music event going on in my local area. And I would take like 20 something pictures or whatever, all that sort of stuff. And then I would go to the local camera shop, which used to be, when I used to go to Mount Druitt, obviously. I'm picking a Mount Druitt nostalgia here, guys. So I would get those cameras, do that, take those photos. And then when it was done, when the music thing was done, I would go to one of the camera stores, and I would get them to process it. And boom, there you go. I got some really cool pictures.
And let me take you, I'm not sure what year this was, but since we've got smartphones now, this was the pre-smartphone of all smartphones. If you remember, I wrote it down, which was the Casio calculator watch, where it would tell you the time, but you could also do calculations on it, if you remember.
Yeah, so I actually remember the Casio calculators, and if you actually hacked, there was actually a certain code that you could actually put in, and you could actually play. I think it was not Minesweeper. I think it was actually Tetris. Yeah, I think it was Tetris that you could actually play if you actually typed in a certain code. And all the Casio calculators at the time had that little thing put in. So that was really, really cool.
I remember, I don't know if I had one, but I remember them vividly. And, they were sort of cool because you could wear the watch on your hand. And back then, way before, I don't know when we had calculators, but when you didn't have one at hand, you could just go to your watch and calculate things. And it was kind of like a mini smartwatch before the smartwatch became a smartwatch, if you know what I mean. Like, how did you have a Casio calculator watch?
Not exactly. I didn't have one specifically, but I did there's one thing I did have, and it was one of those old calculators, the one that actually had the printer ink and stuff like that in it with a small roll of paper. Those are very old versions of those cameras. Sorry, not those cameras, the calculators. You know what I mean? I think you used to be able to get them for your businesses and stuff like that. And I also think, if I remember right, they used to have those kind of calculators as rulers as well. You could take them to school. It used to be designed that way. You could actually use a calculator on your ruler.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah, it came with its own thing. And there was a friend of mine that said, can I borrow a ruler? Do you have a ruler? And I said, I don't have a ruler, but I've got a calculator. Do you want that instead?
Then you let him borrow the ruler with the calculator.
And then his response to that was, what are you going to offer me, an eraser next? So,
I did used to have, I think I used to have a watch that used to be a calculator as well. So, but they were really clunky and stuff. They were really fat and clunky, if I remember right. But yeah, they have no business being on your wrist.
I do remember I had a Casio watch, right? And it was just a pretty basic one, but the graphics on it were really quite cool. And it had, if you wanted to time yourself running, it would have like a little character running, right? And I thought that was cool. And so I just left that thing on because I just wanted to see the graphic of a guy running on my phone whilst in class.
And you got a Tamagotchi afterwards.
Well, here's the thing. My brother, this is the thing. So my brother had all these really, really rich friends that came from rich families, and they all had Tamagotchis and stuff. And my brother had a birthday party, and my friend's brother accidentally left his Tamagotchi at our house. And my younger brother actually kept the Tamagotchi alive whilst he was gone for 3 days, and then handed it back to him.
I had a Tamagotchi. Fun to play.
Yeah.
I had a Tamagotchi. They were fun to play. And lastly, boys, with all these nostalgia 80s equipment, like fun items, since we're going back in time again, if they were to bring these or reintroduce these out to the modern day and age of time now, imagine the faces of this generation looking at the big wooden box computers and the Nintendo and the calculator and the Game Boy and the Atari and the computer release and whatnot. Wonder what this generation, would they be able to go, how did you even use these?
Yeah, well, but like we could say like, oh well, we had a lot of paperweights back in the day. So like, I don't know. Well, like I said, there's a lot of things. Those computer thing, whether it's a computer console or a computer itself, had that the other computers don't. So when it comes to the original Macintosh, that was a computer that had a modem on it that had no IP address. So it was very easy to hack and not get tracked by the police. And that's why that particular computer became really, really valued, because if you, like, legally you had to have an IP address, but you installed the IP address yourself, unlike later models where everything's built in. So those things, they did have their advantages. And even in the early PlayStation consoles, they also had modems on them as well. And they also were able to accept not just PS, PS2 or PS3 games, but they're also able to play movies on them as well. Whereas some of the time, like I give you an example for the Commodore 64, for example, that could literally take anything if you had the right thing. In fact, the Falcon, we didn't talk about the Falcon. The Falcon console.
The Atari Falcon, right? This is the Atari Falcon, right?
The Atari Falcon could do exactly that. It could literally play any console. Doesn't matter if it came from Nintendo, Sega, whatever, because as long as you had a Falcon, you could literally play any game off it. And I think that's one of the reasons why they banned it, because it could play any console. And you'll never see that ever again, because PlayStation want you to play PlayStation games, whilst Nintendo want you to play Nintendo games, and so on and so on and so on. They only wanted to brand it and make a monopoly out of it. So you'll never see a Falcon or a Commodore 64 ever again, or anything like a Commodore 64 or a Falcon ever again, because the world has become more greedy. But they want to make everything a monopoly.
But all I'm saying is, let's turn it. I don't want this to be, serious. All I'm saying is, imagine bringing out all these nostalgic stuff, and you said to a child or preteen or a teenager, turn on this 1984 computer. They're not going to know what button to press. Here, play with this Atari. They'll look at all this. They're going to go, you guys are ancient. How can you, why did you use these?
Well, I mean, if you look at the example of, say, the joystick from Atari, that thing was flawed, and it even had a funny name, joystick.
The little stick, which was about this high off the ground. You got the little sting you could stick on the ground. You got the little suction cups there. The little joystick controller, which only sticks about this high up, and you've got two buttons on the side.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's
give me that any day regarding the gamepads and stuff like that.
Make lots of phallic
now.
Jokes about that, Leon, and don't pretend like you can't. I
never thought of those kind of jokes. Thank you very much.
Right.
I was too young at the time. You got dirty mind. All right.
But I'm just lastly saying, let me ask you a question here. I was obsessed with a PC game that I used to put the computer disk into the computer. It was called Test Drive. Do you remember that game?
Yep.
Loved it.
I used to.
Oh, wait. Yes, I remember that. I remember that game.
How fun was that game? You could drive as fast as you want on any road, on any level. It was just a bomb. It made you feel like you were Don Johnson for a minute.
The graphics were crap. The graphics on the game Test Drive were crap because basically it was just completely based off the coin-op. The coin-op version of Test Drive was groundbreaking because it was not there was no car games that were 3D like that before. But when they started bringing that out on the PC, I think it would have been around 1993 or whatever, and you'll be thinking to yourself, when you saw the reviews come in, it was like, God, that's crap. Just like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that came out in I think it was the Commodore 64 or the PC or one of those two. The original one was absolute crap. It was a dumpster fire because if you ever got to the dam, you might as well just alpha yourself because you'd never get past that level. It was that bad. That's why the second version came out, which was the version of the coin-op one that came. That you remember the coin-op version of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
No.
Actually, yes, I do.
No.
Actually, you needed 4 players to play it. And
yeah, you could play up to 4 players. Yeah.
Yeah,
but that was the second version of it because the original version of it was just arse backwards. You could not play it, and even if you did, you needed a code book at a certain point because it will ask you for a set code. So it's basically like 2-factor is what it is now known as. And if you didn't have that, you couldn't get past anywhere. You wouldn't be able to go past a certain point. That's another thing.
I did actually own a game that came with a card kind of thing, and it was a silver card that had different colors on it. And it was a really fun game because it was like a spy game. I can't remember the name of it. It's a really good game. And the card was about this big, if you can just imagine it. And it was, there we go, there, that big.
I can see it.
It was kind of a silver thing and it had different colors on it. But you needed the card to play the game or it wouldn't let you play the game. And so you either had to basically, if you lost the card, you were stuffed. So you had to basically either guess the color that they're talking about because the whole thing's in black and white, and or just try and write it on a piece of paper and remember it next time. But that was the way that they stopped pirating. So the only way that you could play the game is if you bought the game and you own that card. But but I could never get past the first level because I always got arrested every time. Because you basically had to create a passport in the toilets and then get past customs. And I could never do it because I never had the right passport.
But let me ask first of all, before we finish this up, I want to say welcome to our new subscribers, current subscribers and viewers. Let me put this to them. 80s nostalgia from everything that we mentioned here. What was your 80s nostalgia? Was it the Nintendo? Was it the Sega Mega System? Was it the iMac? Was it the IBM? Was it the Commodore? Was it the Game Boy? Let us know what your preferred choice of 80s nostalgia and what memories do you have with that and what was it like in your time? We would love to hear your comments below in our comment section. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell as well. But
I'll tell you what, there would be one thing that I would want to see done. Like maybe, I don't know whether or not I could possibly do it here. Try to get all those consoles that we used as kids or whatever, or at least emulating versions of them, newer versions of them, put them in like a display case or something like that, and have them all ready to go, lined up on my computer and stuff like that. Just to say, if like kids, say if the nieces ask you, what kind of games did you play when you were kids? And all of a sudden I bring up the Atari games and they're going, oh, this is what you used to play. It was, but I would also like to get all those consoles and stuff like that, just for nostalgia purposes. That's what I tried to get something like that from my brother, but I couldn't find one at the time. But that's something I might have to look into now, just to get just for my own self benefits, just my own self gratification.
Actually, one game I know we're just wrapping up, but one game I actually remember, which I know that no one will ever do ever again, was Double Dragon.
Oh yes, I played that all the time.
And I know one of the things I actually remember about Double Dragon is if you wanted to play single player instead of double player, you actually had to kill the other player and then just continue to walk on. Otherwise, the screen would be stuck and you couldn't go anywhere and you'd have to restart it or whatever. So that's one thing I know designers or program designers will never, ever, ever do again. But it showed how violent people could actually be. The fact that you'd have to kill the other player just to get to the other levels, kind of thing. So, but that's actually one thing I actually remember.
I think that happened right at the very end of the game, if I remember correctly. If there was two players left over at the end of the game, then both of them would duke it out for the woman, for the lady at the end, if I remember the game right.
Well, it depends what you wanted. I mean, that might have happened at the end. I didn't survive to see that.
I did, so I know.
But I know I had to beat up player number 2 just to do it by myself. I probably needed a player number 2 to help me out, to be perfectly honest. So once you got
the whip, you were set, man. Once you got the whip, it was easy. But if you didn't get the whip, you would have to rely on your own fists or a baseball bat.
Yeah.
But like I said, once you got the whip, it was easy.
So if anything, if any of you kids can just remember that we had to go through, we had to destroy our number 2 to become number 1.
But anyways, last words.
Last
thought. Instead of
last words is totally a Double Dragon thing to say or a start. But last thoughts. I remember the old the games, and it'd be good if I could play them all again. I do like the progression of the games, but nothing's quite like the old games.
Leon?
All right, so I'll go back one more time on a nostalgia trip. But the old Commodore 64 was probably my favorite console. And I think one of the last ever games to be made on the Commodore 64 was a game called Mayhem in Monsterland. Now, if I remember right, the Commodore 64 magazine, it was the only game in Commodore 64 history to ever rate a perfect score. And if you ever got that game and you ever played that game on an emulator, you will know why. Because there was no game on the Commodore 64 that had the graphics the same way that this one did, Mayhem in Monsterland. So there's one for you, Cat, and also Buckets. If you ever found the Commodore 64 emulator or something like that, play Mayhem in Monsterland, because you will know how good it actually was, because no other game had the graphics or the gameplay like that did for the Commodore 64. And it was the last game ever released on the Commodore 64.
My last thoughts are, I agree with you. Commodore 64 was my ideal computer console. I loved everything about it. Loved Test Drive. Loved the Game Boy. Loved Tetris. Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. This way you can get all our comments, all content, Invite all your friends and family, and let us know what you think. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We look forward to having you with us next week as we go on another wild adventure, and we'll see you this time, same time next week. Bye, Buckets.
Bye everyone else.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.